In 1973, Bernardo Bertolucci turned the cinematic world upside down with the premiere of Last Tango in Paris. The New Yorker's Pauline Kael said the then 32-year-old director had, quote, altered the face of an art form. But Bertolucci would spend the next 14 years largely unappreciated by the critics and audiences. Then, in 1987, he made the epic Last Emperor, which won 9 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. Bertolucci next went to the Sahara to film The Sheltering Sky. Then, for his new $30 million epic Little Buddha, Bernardo Bertolucci spent over 2 years with Buddhist lamas filming in Nepal and Kathmandu. Today's New York Times calls Little Buddha a dazzling mixture of Buddhist thought and cinematic fireworks. It opens today, and we're pleased to have the director here with us. Welcome.
Hi.
Do you see this as a kind of trilogy for you, as people are talking about, some people looking for nice little ways to wrap it up, view this coming after The Emperor and Sheltering Sky as sort of the trilogy about your own journey into Eastern religions and into Asian thought?
When I did The Last Emperor, I didn't know that was the first part of a trilogy. But you know, it was the beginning of the 80s. I had a great trouble to do movies in Italy because even if it was a moment of great economic boom, in Italy there was such a smell of corruption, and everything which goes with corruption, which is especially cynicism, which I didn't feel inspired. So I said, I want to go as far as possible. In fact, a year ago when this trial started in Italy called Clean Hand, you know, the judge in Milano.
Yes, oh sure.
Yeah, so I thought I wasn't so wrong about the state of my country.
Yeah.
So I went as far as possible. I went to China, and that was the first experience in the East. And I've been completely, how can I say, victim of a kind of Oriental temptation.
Well, tell me what you mean.
That to be able to see China not yet involved with consumerism, as it was in '84 when I went for the first time. I think now it's completely different. Now,
less consumed by consumerism?
Oh yes, it was a
now,
kind
you're
of...
talking about China, or you're talking about all, you know, whether...
No, I'm talking
Tibet
about...
or
I'm
everywhere?
talking about China in '84, as it was. Now, today, there is an incredible boom also there, but that was the eternal China, the one I met. And then today, of course, I mean, Little Buddha is shot in Nepal and Bhutan. Anyway, I felt like looking for something different. And I found it, I think.
But what did you find?
Many things. It's difficult to resume and to synthesize the experience of discovering the East. For me, I mean, somebody else knows the East, but for me it was a great discovery. For example, I think Little Buddha is a bit the synthesis of things that I understood and I learned, especially with The Last Emperor in the Chinese experience. For example, how they refer to individuals. How would we refer to individual in the West, and how they think the individual is in the East. Here we have to come out from the masses. We have to have a bigger name in the credits and all this. And there is a kind of great, I mean, we are able to develop our egos like big monuments. In the East, in China especially, I've seen people being very happy in a kind of collective harmony. To give you an example, while I was visiting the Forbidden City at the beginning of the pre-production of The Last Emperor with the Chinese guides, I was asking all the time, who has done this, who is the architect of this beautiful pavilion, or the sculpture of this sculpture, this turtle, or this fresco, the painters. And with a smile, the Chinese were saying, Ming Dynasty, 1233, 16, Qing Dynasty, no names of artists. That was a fantastic lesson. In Buddhism, they talk a lot about the ego, and for Buddhists, the ego is one of our major enemies within us.
Now, have you become Buddhist?
Oh no, I mean I
know you have enormous curiosity about it. But
I'm
you spent time with the Dalai Lama.
Yeah, of course. I went to see the Dalai Lama at the beginning of this project, the
very
beginning.
In preparing for this film.
Yes, I wanted to tell him. I wanted to tell him that there was the danger that a non-Buddhist like me was preparing a movie about Buddhism, and with this irresistible Tibetan smile, the Dalai Lama said, "Go ahead. you will have all the needed detachment being a non-Buddhist. By the way, detachment is a Buddhist quality. And then he said, why do you want to call it Little Buddha? And I said, because I would like to be able to do a movie that for the first time in my life, even children can see. And I thought that also grown-ups in the West, I think that we are children when we talk of Buddhism. We are so ignorant about this incredibly sophisticated philosophy. And he said something I really liked. He said, I think there is a little Buddha in all of us, which is this idea of Buddhahood that the Buddhists have, that each one of us has the potential Buddhity inside, Buddhahood inside. I mean, but it's asleep.
Tell me a little bit about the notion. I mean, is the story... Tell us the story first. And then I want to...
At the beginning, there was an idea of doing a movie about the life of Buddha.
Right.
Then I thought, I'm more interested in seeing the confrontation between the thoughts of a man who lived 2,500 years ago with our reality, our present, our days.
Right.
So I found this story of this...
So you had two ideas you need to marry, one contemporary...
the present and the past.
Right.
And how Buddhism has a resonance in the present, today. Yeah. So I have this old Tibetan Lama going to...
Lama being teacher?
Mean teacher, guru, going to Seattle because he heard that maybe there is a boy who is the reincarnation of his old Lama, teacher, his own Lama, who died 9 years ago, exactly when the little boy was born.
Right.
And then so this little kid wants to know what's all about. And so the old Lama tells the story of Siddhartha, which is a young prince which will become Buddha, as a fairy tale, as a fable to the little boy. And so you have this contrast between the present and the past. And the past part is this young prince in his summer palace. Somebody was never able to go out of his palace, to walk out of his palace. He's there in a kind of wonderful golden cage. And one day he will wake up and he will walk out of the palace and he will learn the meaning of words like suffering, old age, sickness, death.
All right, let me take a look. You may want to set this up. The clip we'll see from Little Buddha is where Buddha greets the city.
Oh yeah, this is what I was telling about. Yeah. The moment when he goes out of his golden cage, out of his palace.
Here it is, roll tape. And how accurate is the story with respect to Buddha?
The youth of Buddha, the young Buddha, Prince Siddhartha, it's a legend, and there is really no iconography about. So in some way we were lost. On the other way we were very free.
Yeah, it gives you more license.
Visually, visually to invent in some way.
Speaking of visual, I mean, Vittorio Storaro was your cinematographer.
Yeah.
Did he also do The Emperor?
Yes, he's done all my movies since 1969, I think.
What does he bring to what is the genius of a cameraman or a cinematographer, because you paint on such a broad canvas in these films? We grew up together in color. In some way. I started very, very young, and Vittorio, in 1963-4, when I did Before the Revolution, which is one of my first movies, I was, 23 years old, was the focus puller. Then in 1969, he had become a director of photography, and we went through the years together. So there is a kind of communal growing up together. So what he brings, let's say that he's like my own private painter who is able to give with his lightning the colors, the shadows, the light to my shots. So he's really my conscious of colors, my conscious of light and shadows. And we know each other so well that now when we start to do a movie, we discuss, and I tell him how I think the perspective we should have on the visual effects. And then we know each other so well that we can communicate just without speaking, without looking at each other. And it's an important collaboration, and I think that cinema, I come from poetry, I was writing poetry, which is the most loneliness of all languages. Cinema is really based on collaboration. Cinema is really based on the fact that the director is able to stimulate the creativity of his collaborators. Speaking of poetry, your father's a great poet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you go into film because you were looking for something to do that would not be in competition with your father?
Yeah, you caught me. I mean, I started to write poems when I was 6, 7, when I started to write, because it was in the family, you wanted to be a poet.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, in a family of a carpenter, children worked wood. And when I was 16, 17, I started to think, my God, this is not mine. This is not my language. This is not my expression. It's my father. And I've been given a 16 mil. I was 16, so 16 mil, 16 years old. And I've done my little first 10 minutes film. And then I was sure I would have been a film director. And a friend of my father was Pier Paolo Pasolini.
Yeah.
And I remember that in 1960 he did his first film. He met me and said, you want to do a movie, why don't you come with me? You will be my assistant. And that was a fantastic experience to see Pasolini, who was a writer, becoming a film director, while I was already a cinephile. I mean, I was a moviegoer, he wasn't. And so I saw Pier Paolo inventing cinema. It's like seeing Griffith. I mean, it's like seeing somebody who discovers.
Like P.W. Griffith, yeah.
Yeah, like discovering cinema. So Pier Paolo once said, let's put down the dolly track. And that was the first dolly of history of cinema, because it was done by somebody who didn't have a cinema experience. And that was extraordinary.
Who else has influenced you? Whose work as a filmmaker?
You know, I am not a very old man, but I'm an ancient filmmaker, because I started in 62. So it's more than 32 years. I really think that my great love in the 60s, when cinema was something very special, was Jean-Luc Godard and some of the French directors of Nouvelle Vague.
Why those French directors?
Because there was a mutation in cinema, and they were the authors of this mutation. Cinema has changed. There is a cinema before Godard and after Godard in some way. I was...
How was it different after Godard?
That all the way of rethinking cinema, let's say in the 60s, Godard and all his, let's say, since we are in Buddhism, let's say devotees, instead of followers, I would say normally. We wanted to tell a story, but we also wanted to analyze with our movies what cinema is. So cinema was a story, characters, but also the conscience of cinema. I remember saying that a dolly track movement of a pan of 360 degrees was an affaire de morale. Something regarding morality, and style was so important, style and politics.
Well, it was about 20 years ago, as I remember, 73 when Last Tango in Paris came out.
Yeah, that was already after 10, 12 years I started.
Yeah. Did you have some sense when you wrapped that you had something special there that would be heralded not just by Pauline Kael, but others as some kind of landmark movie and landmark performance by Brando?
You know, I think I'm the last one
to know
what I have done, and because I work in a state of kind of trance in some way. I mean, I need to go to the cutting room to start to understand what the movie is, because
and that's where it happens for you more than directing the shots, but it happens to you when you put it together in the editing room. For you,
I mean, directing is the letting out the beautiful chaos, and editing is to put order in that chaos.
Yeah.
And
so directing is creating chaos, and editing
is
putting
find
order into
the
chaos.
reason within the chaos and the reason why.
And you don't see the order when you're creating the chaos as out on the location.
No, I mean
it's almost like you're creating the colors that you can later bring together?
You know, there is always a kind of attempt to balance what is written on the script and what life gives me. I remember meeting Jean Renoir in something like 20 years ago in 74 in Hollywood. He was 80 years old. He was an incredible mind about cinema because he was speaking like Godard. So he had our experience in the 30s. Anyway, he told me something. He said, "Il faut toujours laisser la porte ouverte." You have always to leave the door open on the set. one door open, he said, because somebody can come in you weren't expecting, and that is life intruded into cinema, and this is very important. So to balance always the fiction and life. In fact, for example, the performance of Marlon in Last Tango, it's very much behind the mask of Marlon, behind the kind of actor studio mask that we have seen in all his movies. So I told him just 2 months ago, I met him again, and that I thought that there was a lot of himself, and he smiled at me. You think that it was really me? But I mean.
And what did you say? You tell him you thought it was a lot of him?
I thought it was, but I know that it was even if he was lying.
Even if he was lying, it was.
It was,
How brilliant was his performance, in your judgment, in The Last Tango?
Oh, I think that, first of all, I had the privilege of having Marlon in front of my camera, different from, in general, his other movies, because he was like forgetting his mask, forgetting his usual Brando persona, and giving me something new. So I think that he was another great collaborator, you know.
What's next for you now? I mean, do you now that you've completed this trilogy?
I think I want to go back to Italy.
Even though the political tenor there is quite different from one that I would think that would appeal to you. I mean, Berlusconi is not your seemingly prime minister.
No, you know, Italy for the first time has voted a right wing. A right wing, yes.
Yeah.
And we always had center, left in Italy. For the first time there is a right wing. And I think that is good to remind the Italians of what right wing means. It's like if the Italians has lost their historical memory. And to have a reminder, and I think I will do a third part of the movie called 1900, which was ending in 45, between 45 and today.
Wow. All right. I'm pleased to meet you. Bernardo Bertolucci, Little Buddha opens around the country. As we go out, we'll see a clip from that. I thank you again for coming here.
John.
Look forward to seeing you again. We thank you for joining us this evening. Notice this clip as we say good night and see you tomorrow night.